It's just a game. Don't tell Mom. And then silence. But it isn't the silence that's unsettling. It's the terrifying normality of everything that makes Roya's heart clench in her chest. The ticking of the clock on the kitchen wall, the gentle bubbling of the stew simmering on the stove, the scent of cardamom and cinnamon filling the house. Everything is in its place. Everything except the sound of her daughter's laughter. Roya looks at Sara. The little girl is sitting on the living room floor, her dolls arranged around her like a defeated army. But she isn't playing. She just stares at them. It's as if the secret language she shared with her world of toys until just a few weeks ago has been forgotten forever. Those large brown eyes that always sparkled with mischief have now become two empty, soulless pits. This change began like a hairline crack on an expensive china bowl, quiet and subtle. At first, Roya thought it might be because of starting school and a new environment. Then, she chalked it up to a small cold. But now, Sara's heavy silence, her self-imposed isolation, was no longer a crack. It was a deep fracture scratching at Roya's soul. She was losing her daughter right before her eyes in the safest place in the world, their home. Roya's life had always revolved around one axis: her family, her husband, who worked long hours, and her two children, Ali, her 14-year-old son navigating the complex world of adolescence, and Sara, her 7-year-old daughter, who was the light of the house. Roya was the kind of mother who found happiness in the details. In the aroma of a cake she baked for the afternoon, in the sound of her children's laughter as they chased each other, in the peace of a Friday evening when they were all together. Ali, despite growing up, always looked out for his little sister. At least, that's what Roya proudly told everyone. "My son takes such good care of his sister, you wouldn't think there's a 7-year age gap." But that beautiful picture, that flawless frame Roya had lovingly built in her mind, was beginning to fade. It all started on a rainy night. Roya woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of a muffled cry. It was Sara. She rushed to her room and found the little girl curled up in her bed, hugging her knees and trembling like a leaf. "Sara, sweetheart, what's wrong, honey? Did you have a bad dream?" Sara just shook her head and hugged herself tighter. Roya sat beside her and held her. The little girl's body wasn't hot with fever, nor was she cold. This was an internal tremor, a tremor of fear. "Did you have a nightmare, my beautiful girl? Do you want to tell me about it?" Sara hesitated for a moment. Then, in a voice that was barely audible, she whispered, "The shadow monster." "The shadow monster? Like the ones in cartoons?" "No, he won't let me talk." Roya's brow furrowed. "Who won't let you talk, sweetheart?" But Sara gave no more answers. She rested her head on her mother's shoulder and fell into a heavy silence. Roya stayed with her until morning, but those words were planted in her mind like a sinister seed. The shadow monster who won't let me talk. The next day, Roya decided to investigate further. When she asked Ali if Sara had recently watched a scary movie or if someone had frightened her, Ali laughed dismissively. "No way, Mom. I don't think so. She probably heard something at school. Kids this age make up stories. Don't take it so seriously." Ali's words were logical. Roya wanted them to be logical. She wanted to believe it was just a passing childish phase. But a few days later, while tidying Sara's room, she found her drawing book under the bed. She opened it with a smile, expecting to see smiling houses and happy suns. But the page that opened froze the blood in her veins. The page was filled with black, violent, tangled lines. In the center, a small, crooked figure was drawn, barely recognizable as a little girl. And towering over her was a giant black shadow with hands like the dried branches of a tree bending over her. The shadow had no face, but a sense of suffocation and terror filled the entire page. With trembling fingers, Roya turned the page. The next pages were the same. Black shadows, crying faces, and houses with locked doors and windows. On the last page, there was a half-finished drawing, the same big shadow and the same little girl. But this time, next to it, written in red pencil in a child's handwriting, were the words, "Bad game." Roya closed the book. She could no longer fool herself. This wasn't a child's storytelling. This was a cry for help, drawn in silence. That night, as she was getting Sara ready for bed, she placed the book in front of her. "Sara, honey, these drawings. Who is this shadow, sweetheart?" The color drained from Sara's face. Her eyes widened as she stared at the book in horror, as if a terrible secret had been exposed. She hastily reached out to take the book from her mother. "It's nothing, Mom. It's just a drawing." "But you wrote bad game here." "What game is bad, my daughter? Is someone bothering you?" Tears welled up in Sara's eyes. Her lips trembled. For a moment, just one moment, Roya felt that Sara was about to speak, that the dam of silence was about to break. But right at that moment, Ali appeared in the doorway. "Oh, are you looking at my sister's masterpieces, Mom?" He walked into the room with a smile that to Roya no longer seemed genuine. He glanced at the drawing and said theatrically, "Ah, that's the monster under the bed we dealt with last night. Right, Sara? We're heroes." He winked at Sara, a quick, almost invisible wink. But Roya saw it, and she saw how, with that wink, Sara lost all her newfound courage. She lowered her head, snatched the book from her mother's hand, and hid it under her pillow. "Yeah, Mom. We were just playing." Ali placed his hand on Roya's shoulder. "Don't worry, Mom. I'm keeping an eye on her. Her imagination has gotten a bit wild, that's all." That night, Roya lay in her bed, but sleep would not come. The house was quiet, but her mind was filled with screams. The word game repeated in her head like an alarm. A game that had turned her child into a stranger. A game that smelled of fear. And for the first time, Roya looked at her son and saw not a responsible teenager, but a shadow falling over her family's happiness. From that night on, Roya became a detective in her own home. She no longer accepted simple, logical explanations. A mother's sixth sense, stronger than any reasoning, warned her that a great and imminent danger was lurking. She began to observe, not as a mother, but as a guard. She noticed that Sara avoided any physical contact with her brother. If Ali tried to hug her or hold her hand, Sara would expertly pull away or find an excuse to leave. She saw that Sara was never left alone with Ali anymore. If Roya left the room, Sara would follow her like a shadow. One afternoon, Roya was in the kitchen preparing a salad. Sara was sitting on a chair next to her, playing with a piece of carrot. Roya decided to try her luck again. This time, not with a direct question, but with a story. You know, Sara, when I was your age, I had a secret too. Sara stopped playing and looked at her. A secret that scared me a lot. I thought if I told anyone, everyone would be angry at me. That's why I was often alone and sad. Roya paused and looked into her daughter's eyes. Until one day, I told my mum. You know what happened? Sara shook her head curiously. My mum hugged me and said that no secret is so big that you can't tell your mum. She said bad secrets are like heavy stones in our backpacks. If we tell someone we love, they help us put those stones down. Sara's eyes filled with tears. Her lower lip began to tremble. But what if the secret is about a game? Roya's heart sank. This was it. The key was right here. What game, my love? A game that Ali says. Sara was breaking. She was talking. But before the next word could leave her mouth, the sound of the front door opening filled the air, and Ali walked in with his backpack. Hi, I'm home. Something smells good. He walked energetically into the kitchen, and seeing Sara's tearful face and Roya's worried expression, his smile vanished. Hey, what's wrong? Why are you crying, little one? Sara scrambled off her chair in terror and took refuge behind her mother. Ali shot a reproachful look at Roya. Mom, are you interrogating her again? I told you she's being bullied at school. One of the kids tore her drawing book today. That's why she's upset. He told a complete and detailed story, so realistic that Roya herself doubted for a moment. Maybe the problem really was at school. Why didn't you tell me yourself, Sara? Roya asked her daughter. Ali answered for her. Because I told her not to. I said I would handle it. I didn't want to worry you. He turned to Sara and said in a voice that now sounded artificial, Don't cry anymore, sis. I'll talk to that boy tomorrow, okay? Now come on, let's go to our room. I have a new game for you. He extended his hand towards Sara, but Sara clung to her mother's leg and didn't move. Roya put her hand on her daughter's shoulder and said, Sara is staying with me today. You go do your homework. For a split second, Ali's gaze turned cold and hard, but he immediately put on that innocent smile again. Okay, whatever you say, and he walked towards his room. That night, Roya was certain that the problem wasn't school. The problem was Ali himself. With the cleverness of a professional liar, he was playing his mother and controlling his sister. The bullying at school story was just a shield to hide the truth. A few days later, the next clue revealed itself. In the living room, Sara and Ali were sitting on the carpet. Ali was playing with a tablet, excitedly shouting, while Sara, as always, was quiet, absorbed in her drawing. Roya was sitting on the sofa, folding the washed clothes. A little further away, Sara was lying on the carpet, trying to pull out her pencil that had rolled under the TV stand. As she stretched her arm under the table, pressing herself low, the sleeve of her sweater rode up slightly. For a moment, Roya's eyes caught the pale forearm of the little girl. There was something like a dark shadow on her arm. At first, she thought it was an ink stain or marker. Children always color themselves while drawing. But when Sara picked up the pencil and pulled her arm back, the shadow took on a different color in the light of the chandelier. Blue, leaning toward purple. Roya gently placed the shirt she was holding on her lap. She didn't want to frighten Sara with a sudden movement. She took a deep breath and, trying to keep her tone completely normal, said, "Sara, dear, come here to Mom for a second." Sara, still focused on the broken tip of her pencil, came forward and stood beside the sofa. Roya took the child's hand. It was soft and light. It was as if she wanted to try on a bracelet or watch on her wrist. Then, very gently, she rolled up the sleeve. There was no room for doubt anymore. It wasn't an ink stain. It was a fingerprint mark. 3 oval-shaped blue marks that formed a grimacing smile. Roya, without taking her eyes off the bruise, asked, "What happened here, Sara?" Before Sara could say a word, Ali got up and calmly approached. "Oh, that. It's nothing, Mom. We were playing hide and seek yesterday, and I grabbed her arm a bit too hard to keep her from running away. You know, our games can get a little rough." He laughed, a hollow, soulless laugh. "Sorry, sis. I didn't think I grabbed that hard." He bent down and kissed Sara's arm. "It'll get better soon." Roya stared into Ali's eyes. There was no trace of that kind, caring boy left in them. In the depths of his gaze, there was nothing but control and deception. He was looking his mother in the eye and lying with complete audacity. That night, when everyone was asleep, Roya couldn't take it anymore. She had to know what was happening in that room. She tiptoed towards the children's room. The door was slightly ajar. A faint light spilled out from inside. Roya pressed her ear to the door. She heard Ali's voice, quiet but filled with menace. "Don't forget what I told you. If you tell Mom anything, she won't love you anymore. She'll think you're a bad girl. She'll think you're a liar. Then it'll be just you and me, and everything will be ruined. Understand?" The sound of Sara's muffled sobs followed. But I don't like this game. It hurts." "Shh, it doesn't hurt. It's just a game. Our secret game. If you keep the secret, I'll love you more. But if you talk..." Ali paused. The silence in the room was heavy and suffocating. "If you talk, the shadow monster will come for you, the one you draw in your pictures, and then even I won't be able to help you." And then Roya heard it, the same sentence that plunged into her heart like a dagger and turned all her doubts into certainty. Ali's sinister, whispering voice, "It's just a game. Don't tell Mom." Tears rolled silently down Roya's face. This was no longer about a child's imagination or fears. This was ruthless psychological manipulation. Her own son, her flesh and blood, was destroying his little sister's soul. The shadow monster was Ali. And all this time, Roya had been living next to the monster, completely unaware. That night, Roya cried not just for Sara, but for herself. For all the moments she had doubted and forced herself into ignorance. But the time for ignorance was over. It was time to fight. The next morning, Roya woke up with a plan. Her face was calm, but a volcano was erupting inside her. She was no longer the worried, confused mother. She was a lioness ready to attack to protect her cub. She knew that a direct confrontation without proof would only give Ali another chance to deny everything and push Sara deeper into her shell of fear. She needed something undeniable. It was Saturday and everyone was home. Roya prepared breakfast as usual. She smiled at Ali, kissed Sara, and acted as if nothing had happened the night before. It was the hardest role of her life. Around 10 in the morning, she picked up her purse and said, "I have to go out for some shopping. It'll take about an hour. Ali, watch Sara." Ali nodded with a triumphant smile. "Of course, Mom. Don't worry." Roya walked out the door, but instead of going to the garage, she quietly went around to the back of the house and entered silently through the patio door. She went to the small storage closet at the end of the hallway and hid behind the door. From there, she could hear the children's voices in the living room. Her heart was pounding so hard against her ribs, she was afraid they would hear it. The first few minutes passed in silence. The sound of the TV was audible. But then, the TV went off. Silence. And then Ali's voice, no longer making any attempt to be kind. "Okay, Mom's gone. It's game time." Sara's voice trembled. I don't want to play, Ali. My stomach hurts." "No excuses. You know the rule. We have to play to keep our secret safe. Have you forgotten? The monster comes if we don't play." But I'm scared." "Don't be scared. I'm right here. This time it's a new game. It's called the silence game. You have to close your eyes and do whatever I say. Remember, you can't make a single sound." Roya gritted her teeth. Rage and hatred were suffocating her. There was a sound of something being dragged across the carpet. Then, the sound of Sara's very faint, muffled cry. "No, Ali, please." And then, that cursed sentence again. This time, not as a whisper, but as a command. "I said quiet. It's just a game. Don't tell Mom." That was enough. Roya couldn't bear it any longer. She threw open the closet door and stormed towards the living room like a hurricane. The scene she saw would be forever etched in her mind. Ali was leaning over Sara, one hand clamped over her mouth, staring at her with wild eyes. Sara was struggling under his hand, hot tears streaming down her face. With Roya's sudden entrance, time stopped. Ali whipped his head around in terror. That controlling, arrogant face crumbled in an instant, replaced by the terrified face of a young boy. He snatched his hand from Sara's mouth as if he'd been electrocuted. Seeing her mother, Sara took a deep, shuddering breath. Her face was wet with tears and fear, but for the first time in months, a spark of hope flickered in the depths of her eyes. It was as if a prisoner had suddenly seen the sunlight. Roya didn't scream. She didn't shriek. Her voice was calm, cold, and cutting, like a shard of ice. She didn't even look at Ali. All her attention was on Sara. She walked slowly towards her daughter, knelt in front of her, and pulled her into her arms. A tight, safe embrace. An embrace that screamed, "I'm here! You're safe! It's all over!" Sara sobbed in her mother's arms, a loud, unrestrained cry. A cry that washed away all the fears, pains, and heavy secrets of the past weeks. Still holding Sara, Roya lifted her head and looked at her son for the first time. There was no anger in her gaze. There was something worse. Absolute frost. Endless disappointment. The look of a mother who no longer recognized her son. a look that said without words, "You're finished." She whispered softly in Sara's ear, so low that only her daughter could hear. "It's over now, my love. Mom is here. There are no more games. There are no more bad secrets. You just talk. Mommy will listen to you until the end of time." Sara clung to her tighter. For the first time, the heavy weight of that secret was lifted from her small shoulders. The shadow monster was gone. There was only the warm embrace of her mother. Roya sat there on the floor, holding her daughter and staring at an unknown point. The house was quiet again, but this time, the silence held the sound of a family breaking, and at the same time, the sound of a small soul being saved. Roya didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know how she would face this monstrous truth. But she knew one thing. She had found the truth, and now she was ready to burn down the whole world to never let her daughter's laughter be stolen again. Sara's story, though fictional, and her fears and silence echo the voices of thousands of children who live with dark, heavy secrets in the safest place in the world, their own homes. Children who have learned to be silent because it's just a game. When faced with such a bitter truth, what is the first and most important step? As a parent, a friend, or a member of society, how can we help children like Sara break their silence? Let's talk about this important issue together and share your thoughts with us. We must never be indifferent to sudden changes in a child's behavior, mood, or play. Sometimes, the loudest cries for help are hidden in the deepest silences. Listening, believing, and supporting are our most powerful tools to protect them. Thank you for your time and for listening to this important story. Here's to a day when no child has to keep bad secrets.